Welcome to another virtual Live Talks Los Angeles event. We welcome Sarah J. Maas and Eva Chen to our series. We invite you to visit our YouTube channel for over 300 conversations much like this. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Our handle is Live Talks LA. Sarah's new book is A Court of Silver Flames. Sarah is the #1 New York Times and international best-selling author of the Court of Thorns and Roses, Throne of Glass, and the Crescent City series. Her books have been published in 37 languages. Eva Chen is the Director of Fashion Partnerships at Instagram and also a children's book author. I am Ted Haptegaber, founder and producer of this series. Thanks to all of you who submitted questions. Eva will weave some of your questions into their conversation. I will let you take it from here, Eva.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ted.
Thanks, Ted.
I'm super excited. I know there are 300 other talks like this online, but I guarantee you there's not going to be another talk like this one, because there are not going to be as many talks like this where the moderator, that's me, is going to nerd out as much as I'm about to nerd out. Now, I'm so excited to be here with Sarah because I am probably, I would say, #1 in the fan club. Maas fan club. And I say this as someone who knows that there are probably going to be hundreds of people watching this talk and being like, no, that's me. But let me tell you a story, Sarah. So BookCon or Book Expo, it must have been like 2 years ago or 3 years ago. My first time at Book Expo, which for those of you guys watching who don't know, is this like, it's like Comic-Con for books, like the ultimate kind of like book, like bibliophiles turning up to meet their favorite authors. And I literally like walked into BookCon and saw a huge poster for, I think it must have been one of your books from the Throne of Glass series. And I started like crying. I was so excited. I was like, oh my God, is Sarah gonna be here? And then I'm like grabbing my book published. I write children's books. I was like, I have to wait online for Sarah. She's like, but you're here to do a panel. I'm like, I don't care. And it was all very like unbecoming. But anyway, I'm honored to be here. Sarah, thank you so much. And I'm really excited to talk about your new book, which is out today. So exciting. How do you feel? Happy book birthday.
Thank you. That was quite the intro. I feel great. It's weird to do like my official tour from my living room with like my dog barking in the background, and like literally there's a good chance that my 2.5-year-old son will come like rattle the doors trying to get in. So it's kind of weird, but I feel good. You know, this book started off as a passion project of mine that I had like no intention to ever publish. It was just something I started writing for fun while I was working on A Court of Wings and Ruin, the third book in the ACOTAR series. And here we are, where it's this book that I tried to like strategically place in my background. This giant like door stopper of a book. And it's it feels wonderful. It feels wonderful just to see it out there, and it never gets old for me, no matter how many books I've published. That feeling of writing and working on a book almost, you know, in this bubble for years, and then now it's out in the world and people are reading it, and I hope you guys enjoy it. It holds a very special place in my heart.
Well, I loved it. I read it a few weeks ago. I raced through it. It was like,
thank you.
My husband was like, why are you up so late? I'm like, I'm reading this book. It's research. I'm going to talk. I actually want to rewind. Okay. So let's rewind back to when you were a teenager. Like, what kind of writer and reader were you when you were 15? What kind of writer and reader were you when you were like in your 20s? And what kind of writer and reader are you now?
So it's kind of funny because in middle school, I read a ton of fantasy books. I was writing at the time, you know, like my very first attempts at writing. And then in high school, I still read, but the demands of my coursework kind of like took over. So any free time I had in high school went just towards writing. And of course I read still, but like writing in high school became my fixation and obsession, and any free time I had, after homework or on the weekends or on vacations, I would write. Like literally the moment school let out for any kind of like break, like winter break, like that night I would be like at my computer, typing till like 3 a.m. And then in college, for the first 2 years of college, I only wrote on like my summer vacation, or winter breaks. And I still loved it, and it was still what I wanted to do. But I had a very healthy social life in college, so that kind of took priority for a little while. And then my junior year, I all of a sudden found that balance of like getting out there in the world, hanging out with friends, like managing like my schoolwork and writing. And this is like a very long way of saying that, the writing was just something that was constantly there. And, now it's my full-time job, but this was kind of the only thing that I pursued with like the single-minded, like to the point of obsessive, force. Like this was it. This was what my plan B was like, there was no plan B. Like plan A was always publish a book. Plan B was if I couldn't publish a book, then find some job where I could work and have enough time to write until I could publish a book.
Right.
This was all I wanted to do. So I feel every day I wake up, and I know it sounds super cheesy, but like every day I wake up and I'm so grateful that I actually get to do this thing that I could only dream about. Like I literally daydreamed about this in like high school math class, like getting to be an author. And now I get to do it, and I just feel tremendously blessed.
Do you remember who some of your favorite authors were in high school or when you were younger? And have you met any of your writing idols from when you were growing up?
Oh man, I had a bunch, and I've been lucky enough to meet some of them. One of them is an author named Garth Nix, who wrote this book called Sabriel. That's unbelievable. There's a whole series of these books, and they're unbelievable. And I discovered them when I was around 11 or 12, and that book was so eye-opening for me because I had grown up until that point, grown up till the age of 12. Like I had spent my time reading fairy tales, folklore, the Bruce Coville, like Into the Land of the Unicorns, those types of books. But I didn't realize that there were like adult fantasy books that were like long books, like set in these other worlds. And in particular, there were stories that had young women getting to save the day and do all kinds of cool stuff, which is like that's how my imagination works. Like I would watch Star Wars and I wanted to be Han Solo. Like I wanted to be like that, like the guy getting to do like the cool stuff. And I discovered that there were like a ton of books that where women got to do stuff, and there's so many more now, and I'm so happy for that. But back then there weren't nearly as many. And Garth Nix, his book Sabriel was one of the first ones that had this interesting nuanced heroine and this really cool world building. And I got to meet him a couple years ago, and it was like an out of body experience. I was like shaking the whole time, and I had books out, like I had multiple books out then, and one of the more surreal experiences for me in my publishing journey was being asked to blurb one of his books and like have my name on one of his books, which is like, I still to this day, I'm like, I like don't deserve to be on one of his. It's like a weird thing, like that imposter syndrome, but also like 12-year-old me would be like screaming like to know like how this turned out. And he's an incredibly kind, lovely person. And yeah, I always cry whenever I meet my favorite authors. I mean, you talked about crying at BookCon. I've had so many meltdowns because I think books are the thing that have always gotten me through like the hard times in my life. Whether it was hard stuff like at home or socially or at school, like whatever it was, like I had books. And getting to meet an author, the full weight of like gratitude for what their books did for me, like just hits me in that moment. So like it's like you could like it's so predictable. Like you literally like I will walk up to an author, open my mouth, and then just the tears will start flowing as I try to explain just how grateful I am for their books and what their books meant to me. And it's always embarrassing, and I walk away being like, what just came out of my mouth? Like they must think I'm like very disturbed. But I still do a lot of fangirling like when I meet authors that I love.
I'm a big crier myself. I feel like I just can't help it. And then
Me
people
too.
always leave, feel like I feel like people always look a little bit bewildered, but I just get very excited and I start crying. I can't help it. None of your characters are really criers. Like you need to like have a crier, a character. You write a strong female character who cries very easily.
Okay.
You can
That
name
would
it Eva.
actually.
I don't know.
Oh,
Just saying.
okay. Yeah. Also, a beautiful new character named Eva, who cries
Weeps.
frequently, and yeah, I feel like this is an interesting challenge. That like, how would that like literally? You've got my creative like juices going right now, like thinking about like how would you write that kind of a character, like in real life. I'm like, yes, like you're my kind of person. Like I cry in commercials. Like I am like I cry at least once a day,
Yeah,
like from various things that just move me. And but like how would you write that in a book in a way that was sympathetic and like kind of cute and like funny and like didn't get annoying?
yeah.
I don't know. Like now I'm
I
like
was
I'm
about to
thinking,
say without wanting that person to like die instantly because they're so annoying, cry so much. I feel like your female warrior characters tend not to cry, and they hold something. They have pride and they hold in their emotions, and they're not weepers. Although like there have been a few crying scenes where it all comes out, with like well, okay, no spoilers. I've done these talks before and I get yelled at because I'll just be like, and then when this happens and people are like, you ruined the whole book, and then I start crying. Okay, so here's a kind of, I don't know, here's a kind of random question. How do you come up with the names for your characters? Because you have such like memorable, strong names. And like, do they just pop into your head? Do you like I can say that for my children's books, like I named one of the characters after my grandmother. Like they all have kind of like family or kind of like something in my mind, or like a pop culture reference, but your names are so utterly unique. And so I'm curious where that comes from.
it comes from everywhere and nowhere. Sometimes I will just hear a name in my head and that will be it. Like that's the character's name. Like Feyre, Nesta, like their names just were like there. But then and like Reese's name, like I don't know where it came from. It was just in my head. But then sometimes a character will walk onto the page and I won't know their name, and I have this weird thing where I feel like I need to know a character's name before I can write them. Like the name is somehow a gateway into that character. And so I will go on like baby name websites and look up like hot sounding like Irish names or like
Reese.
ancient Roman names. Yeah. And so like
Reese is a hot name. Reese
yeah,
is
I mean like that's literally like my like thing that I do is just like, is this name hot? Do I think this name is sexy for a guy? And does the definition work? And yeah, like I will just like write down a list of names that are like catching my eye. And then whatever, like it will just sound like when I find that right name, it just like clicks. It's like turning to the right frequency on a radio. Like there's all this static with the character, and then I get the right name and it's just like I can hear them. So it kind of comes from like sometimes it's just like comes out of the depths of my imagination, and then sometimes it's just me staring at endless like lists of names and waiting for one to jump out at me. But then it's always cool when I come up with a character's name and I haven't looked up the definition of it, and then the definition of it will wind up being like something that is actually tied to the character in some weird way. I'm like blanking on an example, but I feel like those weird moments are almost magical feeling where I'm like, like, is my subconscious like connected to like
Mm.
a overarching like humanity, like memory pool that I
Yeah.
latched onto?
Some sort of like humanity name database. So we should not expect a name like Frank or like Paul, or like a John,
No.
just a John to stroll onto this. It's always going to be like a Reese or a Cassian.
Yes, yes, always.
I'm into it. I'm into it. Now, we have a question from a reader. Wendell's wants to know, what was your favorite moments when writing about Nesta?
Ooh,
I'm sure there are many. I like how
yeah.
Nesta's kind of prickly and like, like I like the prickliness. I feel like she's a really complex character, obviously. And, this book, for those, I'm assuming everyone watching this like knows the general like vibe that this book is about Nesta, spoiler alert, but like I like delving into that and really understanding just how complex she is and like the context of her background and the things she went through in her childhood that made her who she is. Sorry to answer your question, but like, yes.
There
Wendell
you
wants
go.
to know your take on this, not my take as a reader, what your favorite parts about Nesta are.
There are multiple favorite parts for me. My that like kind of range from like not surface level in a superficial way, but like there are moments in this book where there are like these intense action scenes where you really get to see like Nesta like, come out and fight. And like I loved throwing her into those situations and seeing how she would react. Like my favorite like one of my favorite moments is this scene, and no spoilers, but the scene in this like really creepy bog. And there's a creature in the bog, and Nesta encounters this creature, and I won't say more than that. But that scene flowed out of me. Like what's on the page is almost identical to what came out of me in that first draft, and that's very unusual for me. And I wrote that scene all like that, like the sequence. It's more like a sequence of chapters, just in like one session. And like when I finished the last line, like it was this mic drop moment of like, boom, like, and I just got so into that feeling of like I went on this emotional journey with Nesta in that scene of like going from terror and dread to like who is she, and like how, like when she's in these terrible situations, what comes out, like, and what emerges, and then like what emerged at the end was like that thing that made me go like yes.
It was
But
like
then
a
on the
mic drop moment, like
it
where you
was
dropped the mic,
it
except
was
you were probably tempted to drop your laptop and be like, yes, but then you can't do that because you just wrote like 20,000 words.
Exactly. Yeah, I was tempted to just like take my like iMac and like throw it on the ground and like but no, I get really into moments like that when I don't know, I like channel the characters, and it all plays out in my head in this really exciting way. But like on a more like deeper emotional level, like one of my favorite things with writing about Nesta was just her overall journey from the person that she is at the beginning of the book, who is very broken, and angry and lashes out at other people and herself, and like that journey she goes on from that person and that dark place to where she winds up at the end of the book. And that journey was one of the favorites that I've ever written. And it's not easy for Nesta at all. She doesn't, get a pass for all her previous behavior. She has to confront it, and she has to work hard every single day and moment to get to that person who she is by the end of the book. And who she is by the end of the book still isn't a perfect person by any means. She's still a work in progress. And I think her journey meant so much to me because like I've struggled with mental health, like for a good chunk of my life, but then especially in recent years. And I had some pretty rough years recently that prompted me to start going into therapy and taking better care of myself, but also learning more about myself and my like anxiety and depression, and past traumas and all of that. And so even though none of what Nesta goes through is a direct reflection of anything I went through, I was just able to channel a lot of those feelings and almost walk on that journey with her. Like when I started writing this book, I was kind of still emerging from this very dark and difficult place that I myself had fallen into. And I kind of went on the journey with her. And so there's like this very deep connection that I have with Nesta and what she goes through. And I'm still a work in progress. Sorry. My earphone just fell out. But I'm still a work in progress. And I with this book, like I never sit down, and think like, what's my message in this book? But this one I think does have this undercurrent message of like learning to love yourself and love other people, and that you are worthy of love. And so that whole journey for Nesta was like one of my favorites that I've ever written.
Do you think because of the, well, not like exact parallels, but in some ways parallels to the journey you went through in mental health, do you think that made it easier for you to write the book or harder? Or do you think it was more challenging to write it because it was something that you identified with, or kind of easier because you could kind of pull from your personal experience?
It was both. It was easier to slip into her head because I understood like what I could understand, like what she was going through, what she felt, but then getting into her headspace and walking down that road with her was very emotionally draining at times. I mean, I cried so much. You want to talk about crying? Like I cried so much while writing this book. Like sad tears and happy tears later on. And it just was a very intense book for me to write. And then, yeah, I mean, like I basically, like I opened up a vein and bled onto the page, in a way. Like that's how, like, kind of how it felt. And I don't see Nesta as, like a mirror of myself in any way, but going on my own journey with mental health really, I think it gave me more insight into what she goes through. It certainly gave me insight into some of the therapies she does, like meditation, breathing exercises, like physical exercise. Like in addition to therapy and medication, like I like got into meditating every day and working out every day, and those things like really like helped me. And so I kind of, in a fantasy world, and the ACOTAR world, they don't have therapists and like medicate, they don't have Prozac, but like Nesta, I wanted to explore like how Nesta, how do you face mental health stuff in this fantasy world, and again, Nesta is still like, by the end of this book, Nesta isn't healed. There's no cure for any of this. It's more about learning to face those things and understand yourself and why you do certain things, and then be able to move forward and like forward into your life and open yourself up more to other people. So that was a very long rambling answer to your question, but so basically it was easy to get into her mindset and to channel that, but it was just emotionally, like it's intense. It was intense to do that.
Mm-hmm. One of your readers, Dahlia, had a question along these lines. I'm like terrible with names, honestly. And you answered part of this about like why you wanted to write Nesta's story, but she wants to know, like, did you always plan to address her story and always plan to do this kind of like tangential book about another one of the sisters? And if so, I'm adding this part to Dahlia's question. Do you have another book planned for the third sister?
Yeah, so yes to everything. As soon as Nesta and Elaine came back onto the page in A Court of Mist and Fury, I knew that they would have journeys beyond like what the readers were seeing, that they were in the middle of their own journeys, that were, Feyre was only getting to see a little bit of them. And Nesta was just a character who, even in book one, like she grabbed me by the throat. Like she was her own person and felt keenly alive to me as a character. So I said this earlier, but when I was working on A Court of Wings and Ruin, I began working on this book for fun. And at the time, I was only contracted for just the original 3 books in the series. And I had no official plans to write anything more. And when I began working on this book, it was just for fun because I was faced with the prospect of having to say goodbye to these characters in this world after 3 books. And I wanted to know what happened afterward. I wanted to know what happened with Nesta and Cassian, who had this crazy chemistry from the moment they were in a room together. So I began writing it just to explore it. And I wound up writing like, a couple hundred pages of it, daydreaming about the other stories I wanted to tell within the world. And I realized that there was a lot that I wanted to do with this world. And one of the things that fascinated me was not just Nesta and Cassian's story, but this idea of, okay, the big bad was defeated at the end of the 3rd book, but the world changed in major ways. The wall between the human and fairy lands came down. And what do you do like in a world like that? How do you rebuild a world like that? Like after the big battle has been fought, what comes next? The rebuilding, but also the political dramas of who gets what kind of power, and these fairies who have been confined above the wall for all this time, like they're looking towards these vulnerable lands. What are they going to do? Are they going to start trouble? What are Feyre and Rhys and the Night Court people going to do like in that world? Are they going to be the ones who defend the humans? Are they going to say we've done enough? we're just going to chill here? What do they owe the rest of the world? And so these like larger questions just started coming up. And even though each one of these books is a standalone that features like its own couple, there is that overarching thing and an overarching plot that is starting to build. So I was thinking about all that for a while, just like quietly on my own. And then I went out to lunch with my my then editor many years ago, and I had like one too many drinks, and I wound up like drunkenly pitching her these books. Like I wasn't like a pitch like, hey, buy my books. It was just like oh my God, like let me tell you what happens next with all the characters. Cause she and I were working on like, I think we were still working on Mist and Fury. I was writing ACOWAR, but we were finishing up Mist and Fury at the time. And so like she wanted to know what happened next. And so I, over the course of like 2 hours, like explained to her all my plans, what the Nesta and Cassian book would include, what was coming next, what plans I had for Elaine and for Moore and Asriel and like all these other, like she wanted to know everything. So I just like, kept drinking and explaining it to her. And then like 2 weeks later, got a call that they wanted to buy these books I had like drunkenly pitched and then forgotten about. I was like, oh yeah, I guess I did do that. And so of course I said yes. I mean, like I knew at that point that those were stories I wanted to tell. And yeah, here we are. I mean, it's
funny.
it's exciting to get to write like to get to have written Nesta's story was such a dream come true for me, and it because I knew so early on, like while I was finishing up Mist and Fury and then working on Aqua War, like because I knew this is where I wanted things to go, it allowed me to plant things for her journey and even Elaine's journey early on, and to set that journey up. And I knew I didn't want Nesta to be sympathetic at the beginning. Like I didn't want people like, you know, like I mean, I didn't want people to like hate her, but like I wanted her to like be complex and like her to be a complex, imperfect person who had a journey to go on, and the flaws in her character and the bad things she's done in the past, you know, those don't disqualify her from having a story that needs to be told, and disqualify her from, you know, being able to work past that and earn a happy ending and a happier future for herself. And yeah, so there was a lot of planning involved. I always try and keep like one eye on the horizon when I'm writing, just to make sure that, like, you know, in the book I'm working on, I can set up for things later on. So there's actually lots of little secrets in Silver Flames. Yeah, that's set up for,
nice.
for later.
I feel like I caught some of those Easter eggs like that you hid. I feel like as I was reading, I was like, I feel like this is gonna go somewhere. But like, note to self, get drunk with one's editor more frequently. Yes. And then that will result in like a whole new book series. So you mentioned the Night Court, and you have a reader named Sequoia who has the question: if you could spend one day in one of the courts besides Night Court, which would you go to? What would you do and why?
Ooh.
Good job, Sequoia. You're stumping the author.
I know. Okay. See, my problem is that my favorite season is autumn. Like I love the autumn. I love the colors. I love fall. Like I love the smell in the air. Halloween's my favorite holiday. So I would want to go to the autumn court just to see the beauty. But everyone in the autumn court is a giant asshole.
I was about to say they're all super problematic and obnoxious.
They're horrible people. So I would want to go to the autumn court on like a day when everyone is like not there, so I can just enjoy it.
Yeah.
And I think I'd want to go to the summer court just to see Tarquin, because like I have like a thing for him, even though summer, it would have to be like not too hot. Like I hate when it's like super hot and humid and I'm just like sweating. Like that's not my thing.
I feel like it's not humid in your universe. It's like the peak ideal of every season. Like spring court doesn't, like, I mean, it rains once in a while, but it's not like a swamp, you know, and then summer court doesn't ever get that like stick to your body humidity. I feel like it's an idealized version of every season. Yeah,
I mean, it's like 73 degrees and breezy in the summer court. That's my ideal. But then I think I'd also want to go to the day court to see Helion and like his 1,000 libraries in his city. And I don't know. There are a lot of, like, basically I want to go everywhere except like the spring court, because Tamlin sucks. But I love the spring too. Like that's my problem. Like they're like some of the seasons I adore, but like the people who run the courts are like giant douchebags.
Sequoia, Sarah's answer is basically she wants to go to all of them. So that's a cop-out answer, but I approve because it is true that there is one or two good, there's something good about each of the courts, but often they are ruled by very problematic people. Tamlin. Okay, so here is a question from Crystal Lee, who wants to know, all of the high lords have beast forms, but what would Nesta's beast form be if she had one? And then I want to know what your beast form would be. You're always in beast mode. You're like always in author beast mode, like writing like 56 books at once, slapping your laptop down.
No, okay. My beast mode form would be like, I don't know, like a lazy little otter, an otter-like creature that just kind of like maybe like a sea otter type creature, just like kind of lays on its back and like chills. Like I would be a very like not like cool, like not majestic beast at all. Nesta would be terrifying and beautiful and
Yeah.
definitely, I don't know, like a snow leopard dragon hybrid, like the majesty and like, I don't know, like
Like a
sweetness.
griffin or something, like some sort of mythical
Yeah,
creature that
yeah,
is like ferocious, but like awe-inspiring because you're like, wow.
yeah. Or like maybe like the Sphinx or something like that. Like something where it's just beautiful and terrifying, and entirely self-contained. And I don't know, like now I kind of like want someone to draw a picture of her and like her be like if she had a beast form, like what it would be. Like I'm really gonna have to think on this one. I have no artistic skills to draw it myself. I feel like it would look like Napoleon Dynamite's drawing of a liger.
Yeah. People would be like, but okay, so for the people watching this, I'm sure there are some artists and watching this, like let's issue a challenge from Sarah. Draw Nesta in beast form, like post it on your Instagram and tag Sarah, and so she can see what you'd be inspired by. Ooh, we're making this interactive. Look at us.
Yeah.
So great. Okay, so I have a few fast round questions because some of your readers have really fun, kind of like silly questions that I'm into, and we're going to do this as lightning round. First one, what is Nesta's favorite smutty book?
Ooh,
I
mean, like
on demand.
Like if we were in our like our world and she could read any book, it would probably be like I say, like smutty in like the most loving, respectful way possible. But like J.R. Ward's Black Dagger Brotherhood books, I think Nesta would love them because they're like violent and like super sexy and like full of hot dudes that I think like Cassian would probably get along with. So like Nesta would definitely curl up with that whole series.
Yeah, I liked that contrast of her prickliness and then reading these like, bosom heaving kind of what I imagine were bosom heaving books with like the kind of hot sweaty dudes. Like I like that kind of contrast of her, like that softness and wanting that kind of like just breathy romance, but then like how prickly she is.
Well, that was a big thing for her actually, because like, the romance is like one of the rules is the guarantee of a happily ever after. And all the books she's reading, as much as she loves reading the like really steamy parts, like they're happy books where people are finding love and self-love and finding those like happily ever afters. And so with her reading them, it's kind of her clinging to this hope that she has for herself, like even deep down, like even with all of her self-loathing and everything she's gone through, there's still that piece of her that craves that kind of comfort and wants that for herself. And even though she's not human anymore, it kind of helps her hold on to her humanity. So it's kind of like her reading those books is this glimpse into her psyche. And it's like, the characters, everyone makes fun of her for reading the smut, but I think she reads them for the comfort that they offer her. And the distraction of like the sex and the hot guys, but she mostly reads them because they offer that that guarantee that things turn out okay for those characters. And I think deep down that's, she might not think she deserves it, but that's what she wants.
Okay, that was a great question. Thank you, Rosette. And then Joe would like to know, what would Nesta order from Starbucks? And then I want to know what your Starbucks order is.
Nesta would probably order, I don't know, like a cappuccino or something that's just like simple. Nothing with too much sugar or whipped cream or anything. I think it would just be like something that's like
double espresso
with like milk. Like that's what she would have.
I feel like Elaine would order something like really sweet and like frothy and delicious.
Yeah. I mean, she'd get like a frappuccino, whatever. Like I it's been so long since I ordered any of those like really
know.
sweet drinks, but like I feel like she would get like, something delicious and sweet like that. And let's see, my order, um, if I go early enough in the day, like because I don't like to drink caffeine after like 2 o'clock, or else I can't fall asleep because I'm an old person.
Yes. This
But
is a sign of an old person where you're.
Yeah. No, I literally sometimes I'll be like, oh, I need a cup of coffee, but it's like 2:15, so I'm 15 minutes past my cutoff. So nope. But I usually order like a flat white, either like iced or no ice, or like an oat milk latte. I don't think they have oat milk do they have oat milk at Starbucks? I don't know.
I think everyone has oat milk now. It's basically
Yeah.
law that you have to have oat milk or you're severely, you have to have like every kind of milk, like it's spelled with a Y and a Q, and it has to be like fancy. And then if you ask for like cow milk, people are like, what? That's like,
there's a judgment. There is a level of judgment.
Because people are always like pistachio milk, nut milk, oatmeal milk, and then you're like, just regular milk, and people are like, like horror.
What's your drink order? Like your usual go-to drink order?
Right now, because I'm pregnant, I can't do caffeine. So I'm
right.
But what I did have a very strong craving recently for like Starbucks, like hot chocolate with like a pump of mint, like a mint hot chocolate, I guess, which is like all empty calories, but it's like I'm staring at the snow right now, so like now I am craving that. So
I know the snow makes me crave the hot chocolate, the cookies. Like we had a big snowstorm with that nor'easter like a week or two ago, and even though it was well past the holidays, just seeing the snow, I like made sugar cookies on a whim because I don't know, I needed it. Like I don't know.
One does. You have to do that. That's like required snow activity. Okay,
Exactly.
Kendall has a question about this is another like fun one. Are there any songs that remind you of Nesta and Cassian? And then I'm going to piggyback on Kendall's question and also ask, when you're writing, do you listen to music? Are you like more of like I need to write in total silence kind of person? And if you do listen to music, what do you listen to?
So I do listen to music, but then I've also started writing in silence because I have a 2.5-year-old son, and so putting on headphones and blasting music, like I can't hear what's happening in that. Like my husband Josh is looking after him, but like I don't know, like you're a mom, I like to hear, just like I like to keep one ear out for like any kind of loud thuds or screams. But I usually write to music, a lot of classical music, movie scores. In terms of like a Nesta and Cassian song, oh man, I mean, like I don't think there are a lot of like movie score, like there are like some like classical pieces that remind me of them, but weirdly, this is so weird, and like please no one like read into this or judge me, but like several years ago I went to this Blink 182 concert while I was at Comic-Con San Diego, and I love Blink 182, like I've loved them since I was a kid, but this song called Stay Together for the Kids began playing. Like they played the song, and I'd known that song for years, but I was in the middle of daydreaming about this story, this book, and something about that song just spoke to me about Nesta, and I had this whole scene play out in my head that kind of later became the scene where Nesta, this is like sort of a spoiler, but like Nesta goes back to her family's cottage, and like that's all I'll say about it. But like that, there is something in that song, the like anger and like sadness, I don't know, there's something in that song that allowed me to tap into her, and it's so ridiculous because it's like Blink 182 like it's like a Blink 182, like again, I love them, like I love Blink 182, I've loved them since I was like 9 years old, but I like they're like, that's like the first song that like jumps to mind.
It could be like, you could literally be like, well, you know, there's this Backstreet Boys song. So, and it's called I Want It That Way, and it really makes me think of the complex relationship Nesta has like It could be worse. Like let's be real. It could be worse. Like speaking of the writing process, you have a lot of readers who are aspiring writers themselves, and we have two questions about the writing process. One from Melissa, and one from Isabella. Now, Isabella wants to know: do you have any advice for people who want to write at a young age? Now, she doesn't specify what age, but like what advice would you give your younger, like maybe teenage or like teen readers who want to be writers when they grow up, like you?
I have a lot of advice. I feel like I could spend a whole other hour talking about all of my
You don't
advice.
have a whole other hour. You have
No, we don't.
Question, because we have many more questions to get to in our remaining 10 minutes.
Okay, all right. I guess my biggest bit of advice would be to write what you love, not what you think you should be writing, and to give yourself permission to suck. I have met so many writers and aspiring writers who say like, I've got all these ideas, but every time I sit down I get tripped up because the words don't come out the way I want them to. And I explain every single time, my first drafts are so bad and so messy. Even to this day, I've published like 15 plus books, whatever it is. My first drafts are like a dumpster fire of crap. And the only way that I get to that last page is by giving myself permission to suck. And by telling myself, it doesn't matter if this is so stupid and my editor is going to laugh at me, which she doesn't do because she's amazing. But it doesn't matter if it sucks. What matters is writing something down, and I can revise it later. And the act of writing it down, no matter how stupid it might seem, it allows me to start distilling the story and figuring out what I want to actually do and say with that story and what I want the characters to do. And it's hard to just let yourself like write crap that isn't what's exactly in your head, or it's not coming out perfectly, but just like shut out that voice and just like write it. Because someone very wisely once said, like, you can't fix a blank page. So just write the damn thing.
Who said that? That's smart. I like that.
I don't know. I heard it years ago.
Definitely Confucius or someone. Confucius said it. No, I'm into that. I remember I met Jodi Picoult, who's written like 50 books or something like epic like that. And I asked her the same question, and she basically was just write like kind of let it all out, and then let your editor edit.
Exactly. I mean, that's exactly it. Like I've often referred to my first drafts as just like me vomiting onto the page, or like opening up a vein and bleeding onto the page. It's like lots of bodily fluid that goes out into the, the story.
And then Melissa, another aspiring writer or curious about the writing process, wants to know what's your least favorite part in the writing process. For me, I feel like it's that like when you hand in that first draft and then you're waiting for your editor to come back to you, because it's like it reminded me of being in school and waiting to get your like essay or your homework or your test back, and you're like, ah. But like, what's your least favorite part?
I definitely have that same exact feeling every time I turn in a first draft. And I usually send in my first drafts with a giant email that's like, please don't judge me. I know I need to fix this, and this. But for me, I think like the worst, or just not the worst in like a bad way, but just like the hardest part is like the copy edits, like first pass pages stage, where the book is like done, but you're just making sure like obsessively that all the plot lines work and like the characters are described like the way they've been before in the books, and just all those little tiny things, and making sure that I haven't forgotten anything on my end, any last little details that might help bring a character to life. And it's kind of like all these little last minute checks and things, and just ransacking my mind to make sure everything that I want to be in this book is in this book. That is always very intense and stressful for me. And then once it goes off to the printer, then I'm like, it's not my problem anymore. But until that point, I am like quietly freaking out.
Well, this is something I think that readers are always surprised by, but like, can you talk about how long it takes for a book to be published? Because I feel for children's books, like picture books, it takes like 2 to 3 years. So I have books that are coming out in 2022 that I finished like last year.
Wow.
Like when did you finish A Court of Silver Flames? Like, was that a year ago? When did you start writing it?
No, I feel like we sent it off to the printer earlier this past fall, maybe. Like, so okay, so well, don't take my current like pace as like the norm, because my books literally, like, I max out the amount of time that like however much time we need at the printer, like that is exactly the amount of time. Like I because of how long the books are and how long it takes me to edit them, like we send these books off to the printer like at the last possible day to like make sure that we can print enough copies and get them to stores.
You are every editor's worst nightmare, in other words.
I am. I'm every publisher's worst nightmare. It's not just my editor, it's the whole production team and the printer. I mean, we had one book come out years ago where the printer had to work 24 hours a day to get the books out on time, because I had, I think taken maybe like a week or two more than like I should have. So since then we've figured out like the exact schedule for like what's the drop dead date. But when I was first getting started, it was the same. Like, we had like really long lead times. I think I sold Throne of Glass, my first book, in March of 2010, and it didn't hit shelves until August of 2012. And so that was like 2.5 years. And a lot of that was spent editing the book, but then also there's this whole other side to it, of, when the book's done, making sure that advanced copies can get out to reviewers and, bloggers, and, that they can do the marketing element. So it kind of, so I used to have a much longer time, but now like when I start writing a draft, God, when did I turn in the first draft of Akasif? I can't remember. I feel like it was like, if my editor is watching this, she probably knows the answer, but it wasn't as long ago as you would think. It was probably like fall, early, like winter of like 2019, like, maybe December 2019 was it then? I don't know. Don't quote me on that. But we did like back-to-back like rounds of edits, and right now I'm doing edits on Crescent City 2, which will be out a year from now. So like I think like next week I'll get my second round of edits on Crescent City 2. And so I mean, like there is like a lot, like even though this book's not going to be out for a year, it's weird. It's weird to like have to like work so far into the future. Like, you're working on something and then by the time it comes out, you're like, oh yeah, like I finished that a while ago, and now I'm doing something like, I'm working on 3 books ahead of that.
Yeah, you have to like go back in time to go back to also mentally where you were when you wrote those books.
Yeah.
I have a question about all the acronyms. ACOTAR, for instance. Like, did you come up with that? Did like a reader come up with that? Like, it always makes me think of like when people make acronyms out of celebrity couples, like J-Rod, J-Lo, and A-Rod. Like,
I don't remember. I started writing ACOTAR before I ever published Throne of Glass, and I think I referred to it and talking to friends, whatever, as ACOTAR. And like, did that come from me just saying it out loud? Did it come from like a friend, like like I don't remember. This was like, I think I wrote it in like 2008, 2009. Like that's how long ago I wrote the first book. And so it's been a while. But the books, like the titles are so long and they're all so similar that like I can't, like I stumble over them. Like I really have to think about each title before I say the full title, or else I'll mangle it somehow. But Akatar, Akamath, like, that's much easier easier for me. Though sometimes I forget that people have no idea what I'm talking about when I'm like, oh yeah, my book Akatar, and they're like, what is who is Akatar? Is Akatar a character? Um
It could be a name. It does
it
sound
could,
like, it doesn't totally sound impossible as like some sort of sexy like
yeah.
name of like fairy or like a shapeshifter or
Oh.
something. It's possible. Now, do you find, you mentioned Throne of Glass in that series, which came out first, but you started working on Akatar first. Came out, it was published first, but Akatar, you actually started writing that first. Do you find that you have two distinct set of readers for them? Like, do you have different fans of each, or do you think that one fandom kind of blends into the other?
um like yes and no. I mean, so actually I wrote Throne of Glass first. Like, so I wrote Throne of
Right.
Glass throughout high school and
Okay.
college, and then after I graduated from college, I like couldn't get a job, so I wrote Akatar while I was like querying agents and trying to get a publisher for Throne of Glass. So it was kind of like a crossover, like, of different timelines. But yeah, I think there's a lot of crossover, like, between like my readership, like, of Throne of Glass and Akatar. I mean, Akatar definitely skews older now, and I'm kind of like,
Yes.
I mean, this book is adult, like, definitely
Yes,
adult.
it
So I'm
is.
really, yeah, so I'm really hoping that, like, I'll, even more readers will discover it, now that there's like lots and lots of sexy times. I mean, Throne of
Yeah.
Glass and the earlier Akatar books had, some sexy times, but this one I think
Now,
takes
this one,
it.
I think, definitely, I was reading it and it was like, let me do an impression of me reading it, like, whoa, like literally some of it, I was like, okay, definitely more mature. But I think, it makes sense in the evolution of your writing. You've written over 15 books. And when you start from the first Throne of Glass, like that could be like, easily be like a teen reader, like true teen reader. And then as you progress through each book, as people get older and kind of change, it makes sense to me.
Mhm.
But it was, did you, in terms of, let's talk about the steaminess of this book. What was well, I guess first I'll ask, like, are there any iconic couples in pop culture or history or movies that you kind of, I guess the teen word that they use now is stan, where you're like, you idolize this couple that might have been inspiring for any of the couples in any of your, I don't want to like I don't even, I'm like scared even to mention who the couples are because I'm so scared of being yelled at by your fans.
I mean, I don't think I was like inspired by any particular couples, but I mean, during this pandemic, I've weirdly done very little reading, but I've done a bunch of rereading of Pride and Prejudice. Like, I've reread Pride and Prejudice like 3 times during this pandemic, and like listened to it and like watched that amazing BBC adaptation from like 1995. But Elizabeth and
Oh,
Darcy
first.
are
Yes.
like I know it sounds cliche to say that, but I like when I first read Pride and Prejudice, I was like 14 years old, like ninth grade in high school, and like I was all about like, oh, Darcy, like he's so broody and swoony and tall. But like now that I'm like an adult, like just rereading this book, like I can't get enough of their sexual tension. That's like, I don't know. Like, even though I read like very like sexy like romance books, like, which I love, like they have just as much chemistry, like sexual chemistry and tension, as like any other like, graphically described relationship. Though I have definitely spent like a lot of time imagining like what the Darcy Elizabeth wedding night was like. um on the opposite of that, I've also wondered about Charlotte and like Mr. Collins and what their wedding night was. I read a bunch of essays
Ugh.
about the difference between like, like Charlotte having to marry Mr. Collins, and like, would the wedding night like I'm not going to go down that path right now. But
Yeah,
I've
let's
spent a lot of
avoid
time
that
thinking
path.
about I've spent a lot of time thinking about Pride and Prejudice lately, and Elizabeth and Darcy and their relationship and what he does for her by the end of that book, and how she evolves and changes by the end of the book. I mean, they both change and evolve, and I think that's what I love most about their story, is that, you know, they're still very much themselves by the end of this book, and they've developed an understanding of each other, but they've also grown because of each other, and because of confronting each other. And Nesta and Cassian, you know, I'm not going to be arrogant enough to be like they're just like Elizabeth and Darcy, because they're very different stories, but like, you know, that's the kind of relationship that I love to write about, is that push and pull, and like, what does the relationship bring out from that, you know, your romantic partner? Like, what do they challenge in you? Like, what do they bring out? Like, what's the best and the worst that they bring out in you? And then, like, you know, how far do you go for love? And yeah, again, like, I'm like, Elizabeth and Darcy are like forever like OTP, like Nesta and Cassian are like way down there, but that's the kind of like thing, like I just love those kinds of dynamics. And like, you know, Darcy, I mean, like, I still swoon over his like dark and broody like stuff, like, in his like attitude. And I think like Nesta is more like Darcy, that like, if anything, like, if anything, yeah, it's almost like Nesta is like Darcy, and Cassian's like Elizabeth. You know, she loves to laugh and doesn't take anything seriously, and that's, you know, Cassian. So it is kind of like, yeah, I guess I kind of like, it is like a reverse relationship in that way.
And the last question comes from one of your readers, Rosette, who has, you now have 4 strong female leads. And which of these main characters, of all your main characters, who do you most identify with? Yeah. So if like, who do you most identify with? And if it's different, whose journey do you most identify with?
I think all my heroines have a piece of me in them, not in like a like literal like this happened in my life and this happened in their life type of, but just like they all get a piece of me. And so I, you know, depending on my mood, I might feel the most like Aelin or the most like Feyre. But I feel like personality wise, like maybe like I think I'm like a hybrid between like Bryce from Crescent City and Nesta in a way. Like Nesta, I think got the most of me emotionally, but Feyre also got parts of me. And you know, to circle back to like the mental health thing, like I spent a lot of years unaware of the ways that I was like suffering and like coping with things. And I think I wrote some of these characters in a way where it helped me process a lot of what I felt. So like, you know, Feyre and Mist and Fury and Bryce and now, you know, Nesta, like, you know, they go on these journeys of reflection and learning to love themselves, and learning to be empowered, and going on those journeys with them. I mean, I said this earlier, like it just, there's something that like makes them like, that makes those stories very, very close to my heart. So I don't think like personality wise, like no one's a perfect match for me. And I really do feel very close to all of them. But maybe it's just because I wrote these books like, you know, recently, like Bryce and Nesta are like currently like, you know, the ones that feel closest to me. But I'm sure if I wrote like, you know, another ACOTAR book from Feyre's point of view, or like, you know, I started writing Thorn and Glass books again, like, you know, Aelin would become like, you know, the one I'm like, oh, I'm just like, I feel the most connected to her. But I have to have that connection to write with my like I have to get into their heads, and it's almost like method acting in a way. Like when I'm writing, like I sink so deeply into their psyche that I like become them. And it's almost like this out of body experience where like what they feel, I feel. And so some of those hard moments, like I am like in the mud, like with them, like crying and bleeding and, you know, word vomiting all over the place. But I have to walk those journeys and those dark paths with them. And it just forms this bond between me and these characters, even though they're just figments of my imagination, but they become real people
Mm.
to me in a way. So they all occupy different parts of my heart.
I think I can speak for all of your loyal readers and fans and followers that we can definitely tell how much you put into all your characters and, you know, all your stories and all your books, which take up like a significant amount of space on my bookshelf. This is like my workout right now with these books. And I'm so excited for you on your book birthday that this book is out and, you know, hotly anticipated by everyone. And I
Thank
want to
you.
congratulate you. I'm so excited for you. And I
Thank
can't
you.
wait to see what's next. I would like to request another Throne of Glass book. I would like to request one about the Black Beaks and like that whole journey. But I really appreciate you taking the time. I would like to congratulate you on all your amazingness and your huge success. And thank you for joining me. And thank you, Ted, for facilitating this ultimate nerd out conversation.
Thank you so much. This was amazing. You are amazing. Thank you, Ted. And thank you everyone for watching. And I hope you guys enjoyed the book.
Thanks again, Sarah. It's an honor to host you at Live Talks Los Angeles. Thanks, Eva, for chatting with Sarah, and thanks to all the fans who sent questions in. It's always sad that we can't get to all of them. A reminder again, Sarah's new book is A Court of Silver Flames, and you can purchase a copy wherever books are sold.